answer.
Hello, it's Wednesday, July 19th, 2017. You are listening to Inception Radio Network, voice of the fringe majority. This is Carol Carl with UFO Headline News. EarthSky.org has done it again. They promise us something wonderful to look at, but oh boy, it's time to get up early. In fact, before sunrise tomorrow, July 20th, you can look for the waning crescent moon and the planet Venus, spectacular in the eastern morning sky. Or if you're up before dawn, say an hour or two before sunrise, then let the predawn darkness also show you the star Aldebaran and the Pleiades star cluster as well. Although that star Aldebaran ranks as a first magnitude star, and the Pleiades is highly recognizable for that dipper-like shape, both pale next to dazzling Venus. Thus, the light of the coming dawn can drown them from view. Venus, the most brilliant planet, ranks as the third brightest celestial body to light up the heavens after the sun and moon. Venus shines nearly 100 times more brilliantly than Aldebaran, which is that bright star in the constellation Taurus the Bull. And as we've come to expect from EarthSky.org, there are amazing sky charts available via the click of a link for your consultation and perusal. You can find them later at ufoheadlinenews.com. And while in this case, the sky charts are designed for mid-northern North American latitudes, don't let that stop you from looking. Because no matter where you are on planet Earth, simply look for the moon in the eastern sky before sunrise, and the two star-like objects close by July 20th, those will be Venus and Aldebaran. Bruce McClure, who writes this, says, need more precision? Well, residents of the world's eastern hemisphere, Europe, Africa, Asia, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand, will see the moon offset to the west, farther away from the sunrise point, relative to Venus and Aldebaran. We in North America see the moon to the east of Aldebaran, July 20th. People in far eastern Asia, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand will see the moon to the west of Aldebaran on this same date. But if you live in India, Pakistan, or Afghanistan, it's possible you won't see Aldebaran to the west of the moon or to the east of the moon in tomorrow's July 20th pre-dawn sky. And that's because, for those areas, the moon will actually occult or cover over Aldebaran, with Aldebaran slipping behind the moon's illuminated side and then reappearing from behind the moon's nighttime side. So here's the bottom line. Get up early tomorrow morning, see the moon and Venus and Aldebaran into the bargain. No, not to forget the Pleiades star cluster. We don't want those seven sisters to be angry. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about the Pleiades meteor shower coming soon to a nighttime sky near you. And in fact, depending on where you are when you hear this broadcast, they might be there now. Let's go from now to the future, shall we? Here's an article by Elizabeth Howell, written for the website Seeker.com. Future space colony? Maybe we should look beyond Mars to Saturn's Titan moon. NASA and Elon Musk's SpaceX are focused on getting astronauts to Mars, and even one day establishing a colony on the red planet. But what if their attention is better directed elsewhere? There's a new paper in the Journal of Astrobiology and Outreach which suggests that humans should instead establish a colony on Titan, that soupy orange moon of Saturn that's been likened to an early Earth, and which may harbor signs of, quote, life not as we know it, end quotes. Here's a quote from NASA on its website, quote, in many respects, Saturn's largest moon, Titan, is one of the most Earth-like worlds we have found to date. With its thick atmosphere and organic-rich chemistry, Titan resembles a frozen version of Earth several billion years ago, before life began pumping oxygen into our atmosphere, end quotes. To be clear, Titan could have microbes, or at the least chemistry that resembles prebiotic life. But it is no Earth. Titan is perpetually covered in an orange cloud, and its atmosphere is not human-friendly. But Titan's gravity is walkable. It's 14% of what we have here on Earth. Radiation on its surface is less than that on Mars because of those thick clouds. and it offers various sources from which visitors might generate energy. This recently published paper's author, Amanda Hendricks, pointed out in a previous book that she co-authored called Beyond Earth, Our Path to a New Home in the Planets, Titan has massive deposits of hydrocarbons, compounds generally associated with petroleum and gas. Data from NASA's Cassini probe has shown that Titan has hundreds of times more liquid hydrocarbons than all of the known oil and natural gas reserves on planet Earth. That book, Beyond Earth, points out that people on Titan could get energy from these compounds if they use a separate combustion source that helps circumvent that fact that there is no oxygen in the moon's atmosphere. But Amanda Hendricks' new research also discusses other ways of generating chemical energy, such as treating acetylene, which is an abundant compound, with hydrogen. Quote, "In this paper, I dig into the chemical energy options a bit deeper, and also look to alternative energy possibilities." Hendricks is a staff scientist at the non-profit Planetary Science Institute, by the way. She continues, quote, "My co-author Yuk Jung and I looked at chemical, nuclear, geothermal, solar, hydropower, and wind power options on Titan. This paper is designed to be a high-level first look at some of these topics," end quotes. While Amanda Hendricks said it's possible to generate such energy using technology that we have available today, she also noted there are ways we could get even more out of Titan's environment with the proper study. For example, more solar power would be generated if we learned about the capabilities of different photovoltaic cell materials, and most importantly, how these materials would behave on Titan. Hydropower would require better mapping of Titan's abundant lake regions, including their topography and their flow rate. Even wind power would require some research into airborne wind turbines. But Hendricks said all of these options are promising. Quote, "I imagine that, as here on Earth, a combination of energy sources would be useful on Titan, in particular solar energy using large arrays and wind power using airborne wind turbines might be particularly effective," end quotes. Delivered properly, the energy would be more than enough for a small outpost. Instead of just sending humans on a one-shot mission to look for life on the surface, for example, Hendricks envisions a future that could generate power for years. In one scenario, solar arrays placed over 10% of Titan's surface area would generate power needs of a population of roughly 300 million, and that's equivalent to the population of the United States. Quote, "This is just an initial estimate, of course, but what we're talking about is something much larger than a short-term human science mission to Titan," end quotes, said Amanda Hendricks. With NASA's stated goal of sending humans to Mars by the 2030s, however, space agencies remain focused on Mars exploration. So we'll just have to stay tuned, stay in the loop, and see how this rolls. The next headline up, it's just something we never expected to set our eyes on. Here we are. Congressman asks NASA if there's an ancient civilization on Mars. For real. That's the headline chosen by Michelle Gorman. She writes this for Newsweek. Yup, that well-respected magazine. Here's the story. Addressing a NASA scientist testifying before the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, United States Representative Dana Rohrabacher said, quote, "You have indicated that Mars was totally different thousands of years ago," end quotes. This is from a video posted to YouTube. Rohrabacher continues, quote, "Is it possible that there was a civilization on Mars thousands of years ago?" End quotes. In his answer, Ken Farley, a project scientist on NASA's Mars 2020 rover mission team, corrected Rohrabacher by saying the evidence shows that Mars was different billions, not thousands of years ago. And he added, quote, "There is no evidence that I'm aware of," end quotes. Dana Rohrabacher, who is a Republican by party persuasion and the vice chairman of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and has also served as a member of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee, pressed Farley about his inquiry, asking him if he would, quote, "rule that out," end quotes. Farley's response, quote, "I would say that it is extremely unlikely," end quotes. The communications director for Dana Rohrabacher, Ken Grubbs, tells Newsweek that the congressman was trying to reach a definitive answer on a question, quote, he gets from far and wide, presumably because he sits on the Space Committee, end quotes. Ken Grubbs added, quote, it's apparent that many of those covering it didn't hear the wink in his voice, end quotes. Okay, that's the giggle factor, the snicker factor. There it is. Ken Farley was one of a few space experts testifying before the House committee about missions to other planets. Dana Rohrabacher's inquiry came after Farley's testimony that the fourth planet from the sun had lakes and rivers, and perhaps even a huge northern ocean, until about 3.6 billion years ago. In a study published in June in the journal Science, researchers concluded that Mars could have had the right conditions for life to survive for around 700 million years, between 3.8 billion and 3.1 billion years ago. Scientists analyzed rocks from the Gale crater to discover how the planet's climate changed from a cold one to a warm, temperate one in which life may have thrived. The research shows that the climate underwent two major transitions. NASA has made landing humans on Mars a high priority of its exploration programs. Under bipartisan legislation in 2010, the United States Space Agency pledged to develop the capabilities to make that goal a reality by the 2030s. It's Way Back Wednesday. We're going to pick up where we left off last week with part 2 of the story of Renato Vesco and the Nazi UFO mythos, previously on Way Back Wednesday. Thanks to our man in the High Castle for providing this info and tips to the links, we were introduced you to a new name, a player in early Nazi UFO interest. His name is Renato Vesco. And, of course, Hollywood took that theme, the UFO Nazi trope, and ran with it, sometimes to very entertaining results. The story of Renato Vesco is peppered with lots of controversy, some things that don't quite jibe. His resume, his CV, in fact. There are some discrepancies about his background, but let's get back to the content, the meat of the story. It was regarding specifically Foo Fighters' fireballs, or in German, Führerballs. Another center in Germany that was run by Speer and the SS Technical General Staff during World War II had adopted the idea of employing, quote, proximity radio interference, end quotes, on the very much more delicate and hence more vulnerable electronic apparatuses of the American night fighters, and thus a highly original flying machine was born. This thing was circular, armored, more or less resembling the shell of a tortoise. It was powered by a special turbojet engine, which was also flat and circular. The principles of operation recalled the well-known Iolipile of Hero, that's spelled Iolipile. It generated a great halo, legendarily, of luminous flames. And hence this object became named Führerball, fireball. It was armed. It was pilotless. Radio-controlled at the moment of takeoff, it then automatically followed enemy aircraft, attracted by their exhaust flames, and approached close enough without collision to wreck the radio gear. It had a fiery halo around its perimeter caused by a very rich fuel mixture. The loathsome builders of this device hoped, and their hateful hopes were fulfilled, that when the Allied flyers, not knowing the nature or purpose of this object, noticed that the fiery balls were apparently harmless, they wouldn't fire on these enormous-looking, inoffensive devices for fear of being caught in some gigantic explosion. More than one, in fact, as the pilots fearfully watched these huge lights close in. They thought that some German technician on the ground was perhaps getting ready to push a button which would cause the Foo Fighters to explode. Hermann Goering inspected the progress of the work a number of times, for he hoped, and in fact tragically it happened, that the mechanical principle could also later be used to produce an offensive weapon capable of revolutionizing the whole field of aerial warfare. Expressly identifying the reports of aerial lights known in some parts of the United States Air Force as Foo Fighters, as being evidence of the amazing, hitherto and hereafter unheard-of secret weapon that Vesco called the Führerball, he sets out some more technical details, and here they are. In bullet points, this object was circular and armored.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, you know, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
More or less resembling that tortoise shell. It was enormous looking. During the day, it looked like a shining disk spinning on its axis, and during the night, it looked like a burning globe. It was powered by a special turbojet engine. That engine was flat and circular, and it generated a great halo of luminous flames around its perimeter. The object was unarmed, pilotless. The takeaway produces other questions. How did the Führerball distinguish an enemy aircraft from a friendly one? How did it stop following those exhaust flames? And where did it go when it stopped? Why, when it was traveling laterally behind the engines of an enemy aircraft, attracted by those exhaust flames, did it suddenly depart, quote, generally in a vertical direction, end quotes, when hit? And which, quote, chemical additives, end quotes, interrupted the flow of electricity by over-ionizing the atmosphere in the vicinity of that plane? Just how did that work? How did it wreck the radio gear of enemy aircraft? Which brings us to the original question, from whence cometh this information? Well, several sources, American Legion magazine, Amazing Stories, and that pivotal article in Men's Argosy magazine. It is perhaps a conglomeration of non-facts, early fake news. And yet, Renato Vesco continues to be highly influential out of history, regarded as the leading authority of the Axis on secret technological developments in aeronautics. Had readers looked as far as beyond the cover of that book from which these claims came, they would have found a substantially different version of Vesco's authority. And here's where his biography gets wonky. Apparently, there is no thing in the Vesco book that substantiates that before World War II he, quote, studied at the German Institute for Aerial Development, end quotes, or that during the war he had, quote, worked with the Germans at that Fiat Lake Garda secret installation in Italy, end quotes. And there doesn't seem to be any substantiation for his claiming that, quote, in the 1960s, he worked for the Italian Air Ministry of Defense as an undercover technical agent investigating the UFO mystery. Instead, it said this: Renato Vesco was born in Arona, Italy in 1924. A licensed pilot, in 1944 he commanded the technical section of the Italian Air Force. In 1946 to 1947, he served in the Reparto Tecnico Caccia. Mr. Vesco has been a senior member of the Italian Association of Aerotechnics since 1943 and is a student of aeronautical problems, particularly in the field of jet propulsion. He's a contributor to various aeronautical publications, end quotes. Well, says the writer of this article, there is clearly something very wrong here. Born in 1924, Vesco would have been 14 or 15 years old when World War II broke out. Surely, by that age, he had not attended the University of Rome or studied at the German Institute for Aerial Development. If he worked with the Germans at the Fiat Lake Garda secret installations in Italy, why didn't those other authorities mention him there? Would he really have, quote, commanded the technical section of the Italian Air Force at the age of 19 or 20 and, quote, been a senior member of the Italian Association of Aerotechnics at the age of 18 or 19? Well, that would have made him a wunderkind for sure. And surely, if he really were that remarkable, that important, his name would have appeared in the index, references of at least one of the countless books about the war. And yet, it doesn't. So who was Renato Vesco, and what did he really know about wartime German aircraft? Enter two highly respected Italian researchers, Maurizio Verga and Edoardo Russo, and they gave clear answers to the questions regarding Vesco. They both knew him personally. Here's what Maurizio Verga says. Vesco exists, definitely. He's an old man now, born in 1924. What's written about him by people like Al Pinto, who is the author of a story we did last week about Vesco on Way Back Wednesday. The internet, says Verga, is misinformation. This is complete rubbish. Vesco's introduction in the 1971 translation of his first book is quite accurate, even though he was not commanding any technical section in the Italian Air Force. He was an aeronautical engineer, and he got an interest in flying saucers. He published several articles about German secret weapons, flying saucers, aviation, and other subjects in the very early 50s. He soon became a real skeptic against this then common idea of the ETH visits. ETH, that's the extraterrestrial hypothesis. He commented and explained some sightings were atmospheric or just conventional phenomena. The manuscript of his first book was ready in 1956, but he halted publication because he was about to go abroad for a long time due to his job. He came back in the 1960s after collecting a huge quantity of additional material. He had hundreds and hundreds of written pages, later to be turned into 3 other books, not translated. Italian researcher Maurizio Verga, who provides this information, said that Vesco told him that certain high-ranking important officials in the Italian Air Force and other air forces contributed to his research, giving him information and documents when they were still classified. Vesco promised not to make public their names, even though he says that most of them are surely dead. Like all too many of those involved in the world of Nazi UFOs, Vesco gave an impression of authority, and that authority was accepted without challenge. It now appears that Vesco was a man with an interest in man-made UFOs, who was strongly opposed to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Renato Vesco provides by giving us accounts of the Führerball and the Kugelblitz in his book. We now know that it was a convincing hypothesis for explaining away, without the involvement of spacemen and interplanetary travel, not only the Foo Fighter reports, of which he was well aware, but also the very physical sightings, the photographs from the late 40s and early 50s. It is unfortunate that in seeking to use his knowledge of aeronautical engineering to popularize what he apparently saw as a rational explanation for a body of irrational reports and interpretations, Renato Vesco only succeeded in co-founding the Nazi UFO mythos, a living and growing belief system which, for sheer irrationality and unpleasantness, came to far exceed anything from those innocent early days of ufology. So, there you have it, gentle listeners, the Nazi UFO mythos and the part played by Renato Vesco. It's worth an engine search. Give it a try. Try as we might, we can't hold back the hands of time, which tell us we gotta go, because that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Inception Radio Network. Follow today's broadcast at ufoheadlinenews.com. Loving kindness. Take care of each other. We're all in this together. This is Carol Carl. See you tomorrow.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million. What color is the White House?